going to hand it over to you, Desmond. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Well, back in the olden days, like 2019, giving an important presentation via a webcam like this sounded like a total nightmare, an Introverts conference from hell. But now it's just another Thursday. Good morning, I'm Jessamine Newhouse, pronouns she, her, professor of history and popular culture, interim director of the SUNY Plattsburgh Center for Teaching Excellence, and the author of Geeky Pedagogy. And tag me if you're tweeting this presentation or anything in the conference. You can view my slides for today, including my script, if that helps you follow along, at geekypedagogy.com/otter. The first thing I want to say to everyone here is that I really get how hard the past 2 years have been. I know how burned out many of us are feeling. So please just give yourself a pat on the back or a superpowered self-5, because you've been working really hard to help students keep learning during an incredibly difficult time. So if you've read my book or, ever met me, you know that I'm a very big introvert. Being an introvert poses some challenges for effective teaching, which depends on a foundation of trust, i.e. human interaction. I don't think this reality is acknowledged frequently enough. There are a lot of introverts in academia because we usually have some traits that make us great readers and researchers and librarians, but those traits don't necessarily translate easily into effective teaching. At the start of my teaching career, when I began to realize that I was not effectively helping students learn, I was worried that in order to teach well, I was maybe going to have to perform extreme acts of outgoingness and utilize extraordinary interpersonal skills. But the whole reason I became an academic in the first place is because I love to read quietly in solitude and think my beautiful thoughts. Frankly, when I got my PhD, I thought this meant I could spend a lot more time in my own mind palace and a lot less time with people. I don't want to alarm anyone, but you can't teach without students, and students are people. Yes, people with complex emotions and experiences and anxieties. Even online, we're all still people. Quite contrary to how I imagined life in the ivory tower was going to be, it turns out that teaching and learning are not purely intellectual exercises of logical deduction. So sorry, Mr. Spock, teachers can't just mind meld knowledge into students' heads. We have to build trust and rapport with students. We have to communicate our approachability to students. We have to create learning communities and help students make real life connections, not just with our class content, but with us and with each other. And I don't know about you, but I didn't learn how to do any of those things when I trained to be a smarty pants scholar. I was a great student, but that didn't automatically make me an effective teacher. And just when I start to get pretty good at those things after 20 some years of teaching, I had to start all over again in a brand new modality, online teaching and learning. And then we all had to learn how to do these things in brand new modalities because we were, and we still are, teaching during the blender semesters. Everyone has to do a little bit of everything online, in person, socially distant, Zooming, remote instruction, hybrid, on and on and on. The blender semesters pose truly unprecedented challenges for all educators. Fortunately, I was able to follow a path to effective teaching that I'd already created for myself as a geeky introvert. The thesis of my book is that leaning into our nerdiness, understanding and embracing our love for our scholarly subjects gives us the power to become lifelong pedagogical learners. to use our superpower brains to learn and to always keep learning how to help students do things in and with our academic disciplines. It's an invitation to college instructors to nerd out about teaching and learning and to use your big brain for effective college teaching, including these never before seen challenges of the COVID era. But before I go any further, I should probably address the elephant in the Zoom room. The question I know you've all been asking yourselves, why is someone who's obviously so socially skilled as Jessamine, why is she trying to pass herself off as a nerd? So let me tell you a story. In 9th grade, I learned how to write a research paper. I still remember the exact moment that Mrs. Haas, my AP English teacher, she held up an index card and explained how to use it to organize our reading notes. I remember, and this is true, I remember the first time she showed our class a correctly formatted footnote, and it was so beautiful. The whole process, from start to finish, it just made sense, and I was good at it. Unlike gym class, which I failed, and you can look up my high school transcript to see that that's true. So for me, learning how to write a research paper was like stepping through a magical door into a whole new world where I somehow already knew the language and where I wanted to live for the whole rest of my life. Oh my God, what a nerd. Most students, most normal people don't experience school this way, but maybe you did somewhere along the line. You fell in love with reading or equations or coding or the scientific method or the Dewey Decimal System, and you set out to do that the whole rest of your life. Those skills, that love of research and intellectual exploration made me a successful scholar, but they didn't make me a successful teacher. In fact, they were kind of a barrier between me and my students who, again, and I cannot stress this enough, are people, normal people. All my academic skills, intellectual curiosity, and advanced research abilities did not help me be an effective teacher until I used them to nerd out about teaching and learning. I leaned into my geekiness and applied all my big brain power to the scholarship of teaching and learning. I engaged in pedagogical research and I dug into the intellectual problem of effective teaching. My journey to effective teaching really began the moment I looked in the mirror and said, hey, wait a minute, I am a nerdy academic egghead. Maybe I could use that to become a better teacher. Geeky pedagogy is the path I took from 9th grade citations nerd to effective college instructor. And it's one you can take too. Many of you are already taking. It begins when we stop viewing teaching as the drudge work of our jobs and start viewing teaching and learning as a fascinating, complex puzzle, another subject to research and increase our knowledge about. Ponder a problem, do some research. Man, that's nerdvana right there. So sign me up. Geeky pedagogy breaks down effective teaching and learning into 5 areas of pedagogical activity. 5 things we can do every single time we teach anything. 5 things you can start doing right now. And if you're already doing them, as many of you are, doing them more deliberately and systemically will increase your teaching efficacy. And these do apply in all modalities, as I have learned since March 2020. Awareness, preparation, reflection, support, and practice. These aren't step-by-step instructions or a checklist of tips and tricks. They're 5 areas of ongoing pedagogical development and exploration. Let's start with awareness. As I wrote in my book, Pre-Pandemic, these 4 realities are particularly important when it comes to awareness. Identity is important. Learning is hard, who our students are, and who we are. Our perceptions of students and their perceptions of us are always shaped by identity-based power structures. For example, patriarchal gender norms are always at work. Systemic white body supremacy is always at work. Any teaching technique, learning activity, or pedagogical approach we might utilize does not happen in a vacuum. We all bring our identity markers, our positionality, our lived bodily experiences with us into the classroom. Embodied identity matters, even if you're teaching fully online. Student biases and expectations around gender and racial norms will impact how they perceive and interact with their online instructors, even if you've never met face-to-face. The second teaching reality that's easy for Poindexters like us to forget is that no matter what other factors impact students and our classrooms, learning is hard for everyone, always, because learning how to do anything new always entails struggle and setbacks and failures, which stink. We tend to forget this reality of how learning works because we educators are usually really good at learning about the subject we're teaching. We know how to do it really well. So before we can help our students expand their abilities, we have to have this reality about learning firmly in mind. And everything is hard right now. The cognitive overload during the past 2 years is real for everyone. And with that in mind, I'd like to take a minute to acknowledge some of the current burdens you're carrying. What have you lost? And what is the hardest thing about being an educator at this moment? What's the biggest drain on your energy for teaching? I'm going to give you about, let's say 4 minutes to do this. You can do it just yourself if you want to reflect just yourself, or you can post it in the chat if Jamie wouldn't mind sharing those with me when they come up. So take 4 minutes.
Okay, Justin, then we have
Yeah.
some comments coming in.
Okay, yeah. What are some people posting?
So we see Ray has said he's missing face-to-face.
Mhm.
Steve says reduce student interaction. I just don't know this cohort individually. And then in parentheses, he says yet. Chris says the way every little thing takes so much more time.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a really good one. Unexpectedly so, yeah.
Margaret says collaboration is low.
Collaboration with with colleagues?
She didn't specify.
Okay.
If you want to specify, Margaret, I'll try to get to it. And Laura says, as an instructional designer, it has been an interesting shift to provide support largely via Zoom.
Yes. Yeah. Zoom is the truly unprecedented part of this era.
Zimmerman says loss of interactive classroom experiences.
Yes. Yeah.
James says a sometimes exuberant dialogue in the classroom and connection with students.
Yeah, that classroom flow. I miss that a lot too.
And Pari says having to do things, technology before I really knew how to do those things and not being in control.
Yes, I'm laughing because that's such a good summary of why learning is hard, because authentic learning often, actually almost always, requires the learner to try something before they really know how to do it. And it sucks. I mean, it's so daunting, especially for perfectionist educators. So that's such a good one, such a drain on our energy.
Margaret kind of specified it's in a design studio with students, that she feels like there's a lack of collaboration or connection.
Oh, okay. Yes. So student, I would say, yeah, kind of across the board, I've noticed that. That's cool.
And Tim agrees with whoever said how much more time everything takes.
Yes. Yeah, I'd say because of new technologies, new tasks, and also because of cognitive overload.
Yeah.
I used to have one desk calendar that I used. Not anymore. I have Google Calendar. I have a dry erase calendar. I have a block calendar where I can manually turn the days like a preschooler so I can remember what day it is. And I needed all those things to remember what the hell I was doing day to day.
Do you want me to continue? We have a couple more.
Yeah, do one. I've got one more minute. So give me
Okay,
a couple
so
more.
I'll do the next one in line then. Megami says, lower performing students find it easy to just ghost on you, even if you reach out to them. Enormous
Oh,
amount of
that's
time is
loss.
required to set up and maintain the online course delivery.
Yep. Yep. Good one. Yep. The time suck. Okay, thank you everyone for sharing. And I really believe that stating, acknowledging these challenges is really essential. It doesn't fix it, of course, but it can help us plan and prepare accordingly. Awareness of who our students are and who we are takes ongoing effort. And as people were just discussing, maybe even more so now, these are always changing. And one thing that the pandemic has brought home to a lot of people is how much a student's individual context shapes their ability to succeed academically. And it's illuminated in new ways how much a student's individual context and socioeconomic status impacts their ability to succeed. And I've also seen new awareness sparked by the Black Lives Matter movement of how systemic racism and discrimination shapes students' experiences in higher ed. But I'm not just talking about embodied identity, but things like our students' previous educational experiences and expectations. And for ourselves, qualities like being a socially awkward dork. We all adopt some aspects of a teaching persona, ways we act or things we do in order to help our students learn that we may not do or say anywhere else, but we can't and shouldn't try to change who we are, even as we're trying to adapt to new modalities. So like, for example, one time I heard a professor, we'll call them Professor Smith, talking about how they really pepped up their students by holding an impromptu dance party in class. Now, I would rather be assimilated by the Borg than participate in an impromptu dance party anywhere in the classroom. It worked for Professor Smith. Great, more power to them. But it would never, ever work for me because of who I am. I would die of awkwardness. And so would my poor students, the innocent bystanders to that awkwardness. Now, here's the important part. Does that necessarily make Professor Smith a better teacher than I am? No, absolutely not. We have this persistent and powerful myth of the super teacher in our culture. It's a narrowly defined, it's wildly unrealistic image of what a good teacher looks like and what he does. He's charismatic, usually white, able-bodied, cisgendered, and he's standing in front of a lecture hall. It's packed with spellbound students. They're laughing at all his jokes and they magically, effortlessly learn just by being in his presence. I want you to get this guy out of your head because he's in everybody's head. You don't have to be a super teacher who doesn't actually exist anyway in real life. You have to be an effective teacher. Effective, which means you are helping students learn how to do something better. That's it. You are helping students learn how to do something better. The second part of developing your geeky pedagogy and helping students learn how to do something better is preparation. So it's not breaking news that we have to prepare for teaching, but many of us under-prepare or delay or procrastinate. And if we are brainiacs and bookworms, we often don't prepare enough for the social and emotional aspects of teaching and learning. Yet, as we knew pre-pandemic, but have learned even more since March 2020, connection is the absolutely non-negotiable bedrock of effective teaching and learning. Connection. As a less than socially adept person. If I want to be able to connect with students, I can't just wait for it to magically happen. I need to prepare. As illustrated in this slide, which shows how to talk to people. Step 1, think of what you want to say. Step 2, say it. If you're not naturally gifted at small talk, a little planning and prep can go a long way. And small talk is anything but small talk. It's important. You can use that big brain of yours, apply it to the social side of your job, figure out what you need to do, and make a plan for building connections. Some high impact preparations can help us build connections in all modalities. I call them a dose of vitamin C: communication, clarity, community, and cutting down on content coverage. Here are just a couple examples of good communication. I created a Google Voice account, which allows students to text me, but I don't have to give out my personal phone number. I also schedule weekly, I call them communication hours. It's on the syllabus, it's on my door, it's everywhere on the LMS. So students know exactly when I'll be at my computer and always answering emails and texts. I say I might be able to get back to you before that, but for sure every week, this is when I'll be answering. I create a weekly action plan for students. It summarizes in one infographic, upcoming assignment info and deadlines. And it's a repeat. Those deadlines are everywhere, but this is like week by week in one infographic. I suggest try rebranding your office hours, which a lot of people don't even know what office hours mean. I sometimes call them strategy sessions. I call them drop-in student assistance hours to encourage attendance. And you want to encourage ongoing communication by conveying care for student success. I don't mean fuzzy-wuzzy care, but care for their success. And so one easy way is, instead of concluding with, let me know if you have any questions, say, let me know how I can support and assist you. That's my job. Never underestimate the need for and power of clarity, especially now when we've all got cognitive overload. Specific directions stated multiple times and with reminders, they're a must. A simple values statement exercise at the beginning of the semester can help clarify the why of the work. And a values statement exercise, simply asking students to identify what matters to them and what will make the class meaningful for them. Check frequently for understanding, using statements, not saying any questions, saying, I'm ready to answer your questions now. Who has the first question? Give students time in small groups or pairs, and you could do this online asynchronously as well, to formulate, write down questions, submit them anonymously or as a group. And lastly, if a student asks a question that you know is totally answered on the syllabus, don't get huffy, but instead seize the opportunity to clarify and to communicate. Maybe they did see it on the syllabus, but they just want a way to start a conversation with you. Or maybe, just maybe, what you thought was crystal clear on the syllabus actually isn't. So if you do want to use the syllabus to answer, you can make it positive and active. Say, thank you. What a great question. Let's take a look at the syllabus. Let's see if there's an answer on there for you. Here are just a couple high impact strategies for cultivating community, vital for building connections. You can create a help forum in your learning management system where students can post questions and contribute answers. You can weigh in occasionally, but it can be for them to help each other. I use a lot of low stakes group work. I don't assign heavy major portions of their grade as group work, but low stakes group work, like doing a note review, co-creating a Google Jamboard, or a set of Google Slides or Google Doc. I've had good luck also with assigning paper posses, which is my super dorky term for it, but you can use any term you want. Just a small group for supporting and helping each other complete their research projects. So they're not doing work together, but they're helping each other, like with shared work sessions. They're practicing their presentations. They could do peer review. And importantly, I include a small assignment that asks each individual student to reflect on how the group helped them to succeed, including how they contributed to the success of their paper posse members. No matter who I'm talking to, I always get a little bit of resistance here when I say you've got to stop trying to stuff so much content into your class. And I sympathize. Every expert who loves their subject makes this mistake. We want everyone in our class to get every wonderful detail of our very important subject. But keep in mind, active learning, people in your classes have to do things in order to learn. They can't just hear. You can't just pour it into their heads. You can't just mind meld it like Spock. They have to do things. They need time for practice, feedback, and continued practice. So try to let go of the idea of I've got to cover everything. That's not possible. And anyway, cover can also mean hide, obscure. Our work as educators is about uncovering and remembering the cognitive overload of our present moment. Nobody ever in the entire human history of education has had to grapple with the polysynchronous realities we're navigating right this minute in higher education. In major ways, we're teaching without a safety net. There's no long established scholarship about teaching during a global pandemic. There's no wisdom of practice of how to Zoom. We haven't been doing it long enough. So one final important vitamin C I can recommend right now is cut yourself some slack. Because you're here, I know you care about student learning and you're working really hard to help students keep learning. So cut yourself some slack, be kind to yourself. Now let's talk about the third essential pedagogical practice, reflection. Nobody is born knowing how to teach effectively. From our very first class to our very last class, we are always learning how to be an effective educator. We're noticing, we're thinking about what's working, what's not working in our individual and unique teaching context with our student population. We're checking out the research, we're making changes, we're trying new things, we're practicing, we're doing it all over again. That's an educator's growth mindset. Now, some commentators have used that term growth mindset in an overly simplistic way that ignores systemic racism, sexism, ableism, and other real inequities, including adjunct exploitation and other pressures on faculty. So to be clear, when I say cultivate a growth mindset, I'm not saying, hey, put on your rose-colored glasses, look for the silver lining to a devastating global pandemic. But a growth mindset can help instructors keep burnout at bay during incredibly difficult times. It never makes a bad situation good, but it can be a source of energy for us as educators. Or earlier, a lot of people put things in the chat that suck out our energy, the time it takes to do things, the lack of interaction face-to-face with students. So one source of energy for us can be noticing the new ways we are adding to our teaching toolkit. You are all very smart people, and you can hold two completely contradictory ideas in your head at the same time. One, this has been a truly terrible time, full stop. And we have also accrued new pedagogical insights and skills. Both those things are true. So for example, after putting it off for literally years and years, I've finally learned how to have students submit assignments and also provide them feedback electronically using our learning management system. It's pedagogically more effective. It achieves all these things I wanted it to do. I just had put it off now, and they don't have to print out their papers. Do I wish I would learn this in less horrible circumstances? Of course, but now I know how to do it. I mean, it's on my tool belt. Nobody can take it away from me now. I've got important pedagogical knowledge that I'm going to keep using. One of the best parts of my job as a faculty developer is helping instructors recognize all the ways they are already teaching effectively. I love bringing educators together like a teaching swap meet to exchange and share our most brilliant strategies. I also want to help counteract so many perfectionist educators' tendency to focus on what didn't work. I know you remember those things better. The lecture that flopped, the student who failed, the assignment that tanked. I want to counterbalance that with reflection about what's been working well. So earlier I asked you to identify the hardest things we're dealing with. Now, what have we gained in terms of our teaching skills and abilities? I'm going to give everyone a full 10 minutes for this activity. And I don't think put it in the chat. What I'd like you to do is, I'm not sure how many people are here today. It might overwhelm the Google Jamboard. So make some notes to yourself. And then after this session, later on today or tomorrow, go to our Google Jamboard. The link is on geekypedagogy.com/otter. And post a sticky note summarizing what you've identified as a new teaching tool that you are going to keep using. And I'm going to give everyone a full 10 minutes to do this. A full 10 minutes. Reflect to yourself, make some notes to yourself. What are some specific, totally new things you've learned how to do this past year and a half that facilitated student success and you're going to keep using? Take a full 10 minutes. What's been working really, really well? And I am going to take a quick camera break while you are reflecting. That was 10 minutes. Oh, that was 10 minutes. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time for some reflection. And again, if you want to share your thoughts, please go to our Google Jamboard. The link is on our webpage. That's Geeky Pedagogy, all one word, .com/otter. So I'd like to turn to area number 4 of Geeky Pedagogy: support. As brainiacs and academic smarty pants, sometimes we're not so good at admitting, hey, I need some help. Higher education has a closed door culture around teaching in particular, but one thing the emergency pivot to remote instruction achieved in 2020 was to kind of blow up that closed door. Since we were all trying to cope with a truly unprecedented situation, it became more acceptable to ask for assistance. Support from teaching centers and events like this one is really vital. We cannot do it alone. We need a community of practice. For example, the online teaching scholars that I connected with on Twitter, they saved my butt when I had to pivot to online teaching. And also I just have to give a shout out to my technology enhanced learning unit director here at Plattsburgh, John Locke. He also saved my butt big time. So I had to pivot to online teaching for the first time. So Twitter really is, it's my personal learning network when it comes to pedagogy. So I'd like to take just a few minutes, just about 3 minutes, and reflect about support. Where do you go for encouragement and support for your teaching? And we can post in the chat if you wish, or just reflect to yourself. And Jamie, if any come up in the chat, you can just share them with me. Where do you go for support for your teaching? Where can you ask for assistance with a teaching problem? Let's identify some support we get.
James added, my trusted colleagues who share my sense of humor.
That's, oh my God, that's so important. That's one of the main reasons John Locke and I made an instant connection. We found the same things funny.
Ray adds full-time faculty and department chair.
Excellent. That's great to hear. Not always the case for everyone, so that's great to hear.
Dan says, I tend to pull a boxer, lower my head, and say I must work harder.
Yeah, that's something to reflect on, because we really cannot do it alone. Even just reading one article in your discipline about teaching can help, at least for me, it helps me feel less alone. If I'm feeling like I can't ask anyone around me for support or advice, going out into the scholarship can help you feel more supported and less alone.
Steve adds ASEE, STEM Collaboratory Contacts at Alfred State,
Nice.
GST BOCES STEM Ecosystem.
Right. Yes. Again, discipline specific support can be so helpful. I know some disciplines created Facebook sites during the pandemic to help with that pivot. So with that kind of social media, discipline specific could be really helpful.
William adds feedback from students during and at the end of the semester.
Oh my gosh, what a great one. I never thought of that, but of course, yes. Yes, that's such a good one. And I've experienced that as well.
Steve adds, my daughter, a special ed teacher.
Family members sometimes can be so important. That's great.
And Megami adds, we have great people in the Center for Teaching and Learning at SUNY Orange.
Oh, SUNY Orange, awesome. That's so great. Teaching centers. Big shout out to teaching centers. They can really make a difference.
And I'm going to make a plug for the Center for Professional Development.
Of course.
Needs any kind of support, feel free to reach out to me and we might know something or someone, or we can actually, kind of create the programming around those needs. So just reach out to us, let us know.
Great one. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for sharing. That was really encouraging to hear. So there's one last thing. It's the fifth part of Geeky Pedagogy that we do every time we teach, and that's practice. Just doing it, teaching over and over and over, day after ever-loving day. And it's easy for me to say, I just have to acknowledge my own positionality. I am a tenured full professor. So practice, including making mistakes, flubbing something, learning from it, that's much harder to do if your employment status hangs in the balance, or if you're in a particularly disparate or toxic teaching context. But teaching is like any other skill, any other thing. It takes a lot of practice to do it well. It was hard for me to admit that teaching effectively wasn't going to just happen automatically. I mean, I went into lifelong student loan debt to get my PhD and to prepare to be a professor, but I graduated knowing nothing about teaching, the main part of my job. But it got easier for me to accept when I realized that I could use a lot of the same things that made me a great PhD student to become an effective teacher. And the things that didn't translate very well, like loving to be by myself, reading quietly, that I could be more aware of them and learn how to work with what I've got. Geeky pedagogy is not a step-by-step process. You don't get to check things off a list and then shazam, you're transformed into an effective teacher for all time. Building and using your own geeky pedagogical practices, it's a career-long journey. It's a road that never ends. Don't look for the finish line. There isn't one, because you will always be learning new things about yourself and about your students. Learning how to prepare for effective teaching. You'll always be reflecting. You'll keep finding new kinds of support, and you'll always be practicing. The good news is you can start right now. Every time you teach, awareness, paying attention to those four realities of the teaching context, any teaching context. Preparation, using the vitamin C's to prepare for creating connections. Reflection, cultivating an educator's growth mindset and making sure you're identifying what's going well, keeping track of your professor wins. I mean, keeping track, literally write them down, keep a record of the compliments, the good things, the assignments that work. Support, consulting with your teaching and learning center, or buying and reading my book, buying multiple copies of my book, sharing them with all your friends. And practice, every time you step into a classroom or you Zoom with a group of students, you are gaining practice and building your expertise. You can start right now nerding out about teaching and learning. You can make it so. We do have time for a few questions. You could post those in the chat or unmute your mic. I think we're a small enough group. We have about 6 minutes for questions or comments.
William asks, do you think that Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hour rule applies to becoming an effective teacher?
I think there's some value to thinking about it like that. Like there's a lot of value in thinking about I have to accrue hours, but I would say, I mean, even 10,000 hours isn't going to prepare you for when things change radically, when students change. Then you're going to have to learn new things. It might make you more adept at being able to adopt and shift. But like I said, I mean, I was getting pretty damn good at a lot of teaching and then pivot to remote instruction. And it was totally new territory. I was starting from scratch. So even if I'd been 20,000 hours teaching, that still would have been brand new. So I think there's some value in thinking about, wow, it takes a long time, and practice really helps. But like I said, there's no finish line.
I apologize, I left myself on mute there. So James asked, any hints for maximizing student participation in Zoom or HyFlex courses?
Oh, that's a great question. Regarding Zoom, I'm going to refer you to my website. I have a page set up in geekypedagogy.com for Zoom specific resources. And it's in, the link is in the online teaching and learning page. So you can go there. That's going to give you a lot of resources and suggestions for how to think about increasing engagement and participation. Some specific tips. I would say just generally, I bring these 5 areas to teaching in Zoom: awareness, preparation, reflection, support, and practice. Noticing what's working well, trying to prepare by looking at some of those resources, asking other people what's working, looking for support, asking my Twitter peeps, what's been working really well for you in Zoom. Keeping in mind, Zoom was not created for education. Every online teaching scholar I knew said in March of 2020, let's not make Zoom the default, but Zoom became the default. So we're all playing catch up regarding Zoom. And that would also then apply to what is starting to be called hybrid. Hybrid used to mean some online asynchronous components and some in-person synchronous components. Now hybrid can mean a whole bunch of things, including bringing Zoom in. But I would say those 5 areas again are what's helping me, and looking to see what other people are saying and doing. Sorry, I'm sort of weaseling out with no specific tips or tricks, but there's a lot of really good advice out there.
I shared the link to your online learning page or online teaching page there.
Thank you very much.
I don't see any other comments. Does anybody else have questions for Jessamine? James indicates this has been very helpful. Thank you. And William says your Star Trek references pointed to 2 of the most cerebral characters in the history of the franchise, Spock and Picard. Intentionally so?
Well, I'm going to share my next slide and you'll see.
Yes. Excellent.
Yes. I want to thank you so much for everyone's attention and participation today. Teach long and prosper. Feel free to stay in touch. Email me, find me on Twitter. And of course, the recording is going to be through SUNY Otter.
Great. Thank you again for presenting today, Jessamine. That was really great. Right up my kind of alley. Ray says your service honors us.
Oh, thank you.
Lots of fellow dorks and geeks here. So you're in
yes,
good company.
I have. It's not groundbreaking news that there's a lot of us in academia, although apparently I was the first one to say so in a book.
I'm going to stop recording now.